Hi, everyone. I'm Yvonne Diaz. I'm the co founder of Oncogene Cancer Research, and I'm really pleased to be joined today by Gillian Ryan, who's living with EGFR lung cancer in Ireland. Gillian, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, I'd love to start off with your story. We came across each other on social media, and I was struck by your sharing your story and getting out there into the community. So, can you just tell us what was happening in those early days? What made you think that something was wrong with you?
I didn't really have any symptoms, Yvonne. So what happened to me was on the 10th of September, it was a Friday, I was in work and I got really dizzy in work, and it happened twice to the point that I thought I was going to faint. So I rang my GP and I said, feels like there's something wrong here. So she said, go straight to the hospital. I'll send your files down. So I'd just been after my second COVID vaccine at this stage as well. So I went to the hospital and I had passed out by the time I'd gotten to the hospital and woke up on in a bed. So they were doing loads of tests on me, like blood tests and ECGs and things like that. And they said that they were going to keep me in overnight. So a doctor came into the room and said, I think you're suffering from anxiety. I'd be happy to leave you go home. And I said, well, I don't agree with that because I've never suffered from it before. I actually have a great life, I'm not suffering from it. And there was a nurse behind him, a male nurse, and when the doctor left the room, he said, please stay because there's something definitely going on. So I said, okay. So that was a Friday. A different doctor came around on the Saturday and he started ordering CT scans and echo tests and things like that. He was literally all over things. Had asked me had I lost weight, and I said I'd lost 3 kgs in the last couple of weeks. And he said, were you exercising? And I said, well, I'm big into the gym anyway, but I shouldn't be losing weight like that because I eat healthy and I maintain my weight. So he came into my room. I was still in there. He came into my room on the Tuesday and said, so we found a nodule on your lung, but it's most likely an old infection scar because you don't smoke. But I'm going to refer you to a respiratory clinic and they can look into it further. So I remember saying, it's not cancer, is it? And he said, Jeekers, no. He said, you don't fit the criteria at all. At this stage, I was 39. So I said, fine. He said, I'm signing you off work for 3 months until we get to the bottom of it. All I could think of was, this is brilliant. I'm going to get 3 months off work. Like,
Oh my,
an
oh my.
extended holiday, not knowing what was in store. So that was fine. I was referred to the respiratory clinic and I had gone up there and they were checking for autoimmune disease and things like that. And then they said they wanted to bring me in for a biopsy. So they brought me in the 1st of November, which was the day before my birthday. Never mentioned, nobody had ever mentioned at this stage that it could be cancer. Like, it was never in my radar. So I had the PET scan, and then for my 40th birthday, I was heading to the Canary Islands, which was the next day. So I'd gone to the Canaries and I got a phone call when I was over there from the hospital to say, we need to get you in for a PET scan. And I said, okay, what's a PET scan? And they just said a more in-depth scan. So I said, well, I'm actually in the Canaries at the moment. And they said, when are you back? And I said, Monday. So they said, okay, the minute you're back, come in. So I was like, okay, they're being really thorough. I just thought I was getting the 5-star treatment. So I remember going in and the nurse said to me, he said, when was your last chemo session? And I said, I've never had chemo. I said, chemo's for cancer patients. And he said, oh, I'm very sorry. I must have mixed you up with somebody else. So that, I'll always remember that. And I went in, had the PET scan, drove home, not thinking anything, thinking, no, I'm fine. I'm getting great treatment here. And then I got a letter to say, come, that was on the 8th of November. And then I got a letter pretty much the next day to say an appointment has been made for you to come back to the hospital on the 12th of November to see the consultant. So I said, cheek, really quick, really good. We were still kind of going through COVID at this time. It was November 2021. There was, you weren't allowed to bring anybody with you. So got all dressed up and went into the hospital. And the first thing I noticed was everybody was at least 30 years older than me in the waiting room. So I thought I'm probably in the wrong room here now. Asked the nurse, said, no, you're in the right room. So I got called in and I'll always remember where the doctor was sitting, where the bed was, where the nurse was, and where I was. I can clearly see that room in my head. And he said, so Gillian, we don't know why you were dizzy, but you have lung cancer. And I said, no, I said, you've me mixed up with somebody else. I said, I've literally just turned 40. I said, I don't smoke. So he said, no, you have lung cancer. And it was like I died right there and then.
Oh
Like
my
the
goodness.
Gillian that I knew died, and this other person just was starting to form from a heap in the ground.
Oh,
And the fact that I was on my own was just horrendous. So I remember screaming as if, like, because for all intents and purposes, I did die there and then. My life as I knew it, my carefree life, my happy life was just over in the blink of an eye.
right.
So I left the hospital and got into my car and went home, took off every piece of clothing that I was wearing, including a hair clip, and burnt it. Literally burnt everything down to my boots because I didn't, it was just, I just wanted to be rid of the hospital, what I had just been told. I just wanted to erase it.
Wow.
Yeah. And just literally scrubbed myself in the shower and just couldn't believe that this was now happening to me. So yeah, that was my diagnosis. So I was diagnosed 10 days after my 40th birthday. They
Yes.
say life begins at 40, but mine literally died. The life I knew just ended there and then, and a new one with no roadmap and no guidelines was forming, and I had no idea what I was in store for because I didn't know there was nobody in my family with cancer. I was the first. So,
Gillian, I mean, that's just unbelievable. And so much of what you have just expressed here will be relatable to so many others of us. And in fact, some of the words that you were saying, I remember like later on, I feel now a little bit foolish because I was also being fast tracked and I thought, gosh, they're so amazing. And
yeah,
I had a friend in the NHS who looked at my file and even said, oh, you're being fast tracked. And I thought, gosh, they're so efficient. And isn't this wonderful? But I didn't think that meant something is going on. That should
yeah,
have been a warning flag to me. And because we just don't expect it, right? And that's the entire thing. I mean, so obviously, look, you've just shared like that really really difficult moment. So tell us like what happened next. So obviously you learned about this. When did you get invited back in? When did you start understanding what was going to happen to you, right? Because at that moment all you knew were those words.
yeah. So I suppose when I kind of composed myself, I rang my own GP and I said, so I've just had the news that I've got cancer, and she hadn't even been told at that stage. So she said, Julian, I'd no idea. So I said, what happens next? What do I do? So she said, you'll get a letter from the hospital. They'll call you back. You'll be assigned a nurse. So she kind of told me what to expect and what was going to happen next. So that weekend, I literally just locked myself away. I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to speak to anybody. I I had told my family, my immediate family, but I didn't want anybody else to know because I was ashamed.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And so I mean that it's crazy to feel the shame and
Yeah.
to have this condition. It's also something so many of us experiences as well around lung cancer is that disease. When did you start to understand what treatments you were going to have and all of that? When did that begin for you?
So I suppose within the next couple of days, I contacted the hospital myself and I said, right, when am I back? Because I'm very proactive and I like to think ahead and have plans in place and just to know what I'm doing. So I was like, I need to take control of this because this has already taken so much of me. So I rang the hospital and I went in the following week and I met with a surgeon and I met with a lung nurse who said she was going to be my nurse, ring her whenever I needed to ask questions or anything. So I said, look, all I need to know is where I'm at, how long I have left to live, will I get the surgery? Is there treatments? Do I do chemotherapy? I had no idea what was happening. So a plan was put in place that I would have a lobectomy to remove the cancer from that area of my lung. They couldn't bring me in until they had an ICU bed for me. So that meant somebody needed to get out of that bed for me to get into it. So I was told, pack a bag, have the bag ready because you'll get a call, and within 2 days you'll have to come for surgery. But under no circumstances get COVID in the meantime because that will delay the surgery. So when the children here were going to school, they would have to take COVID tests with them to bring to check themselves before they came home to make sure that they didn't get COVID. Because if they did, they'd have to stay with my family so that I would be protected. So I basically locked myself away until I got the call to say, your surgery is happening. So surgery happened on the 15th of December, so just over a month. And I went into hospital. I was dropped off at the hospital. Nobody could come in with me because, again, we were still going through COVID. And I think it hit me then, the reality of everything that was going on. It was like, okay, I don't know, am I coming back out of here? The surgery wasn't really, it was probably explained, but I was in such a cloud, I didn't hear anything. Words were
Did you
just
bring
bouncing off me.
did you bring anyone with you? Because that is the hard thing often
No,
when we are given this news. And could you FaceTime anyone? I mean, because that
no. So like you could FaceTime people when you're in the hospital, but while you're having the conversations with the surgeons, no.
no.
So that was fine. I remember having to sign all the forms for the surgery, thinking, okay, this is actually serious stuff here. So like I said, I hadn't told many people. I had told my family and that was it. And I had kept it quiet, and I was really happy that I'd kept it quiet for as long as I did because I didn't want the pity. And I didn't want people to be talking about me to say, did you hear Gillian's got cancer? Do you know, that's just me. So I did a little Instagram post the day I went into the hospital, the day before my surgery, and I said, so turns out I've lung cancer. Basically, see you all on the other side of this. So that was it. I had surgery. I remember waking up in the IC and I was screaming, but there was no sound coming out, and I was in horrific pain. And I remember looking to my right, and there was a nurse there, and she said, I can see you're in so much pain, but I literally can't give you anything because you've had so much already. And it turned out afterwards that my epidural had leaked. So I was feeling so much pain.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
Surgery was, I was meant to be home within a week of the hospital, but because I just wasn't recovering as well as they hoped and as quick as they hoped, I stayed in hospital for 15 days. So I spent Christmas in hospital. So that was horrendous because you're on your own and your kids are at home, and it's just not nice. Um,
Mm,
and that was my first Christmas being away from them as
of
well.
course. Yeah, no, and going through a terrifying time like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, really, really difficult. I mean, obviously, I have so many questions. I just think, my goodness, it's a lot to go through on your own at the best of times, never mind on your own in the middle of this COVID time where it was so challenging at, and it's terrifying also, but did anyone try and explain to you? Because the fact that they were doing surgery, did you understand it to be curable? Did anyone ever share your staging?
No,
So,
not
no,
beforehand. I suppose it was, we need to do the surgery to take the tumor out. Because they said at the time the tumor was 18 millimeters. I had two. There was a mixture of ground glass and um, semi-solid kind of one as well. So there was two there. One was 18 millimeters and one was 16 millimeters. So they just said they just needed to take them out, and that was it really. I had asked the question, will I need to have chemotherapy or radiotherapy? And it was, we'll get the surgery done first. So
right,
I didn't know. I didn't know what stage I was at. I didn't know anything.
right.
And I suppose because I didn't know anything about lung cancer, I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah. And did they tell you anything about what was going to happen with the pathology? Were they going to do certain checks to find out more? Because that would be what would be informing, well, first of all, your stage and anything found in the pathology. So was anything shared or what
After
happened?
the surgery, yes, they did tell me after the surgery that samples were being sent to the pathology and they would get a report back on that. But again, there was nothing about mutations ever. There was no biomarkings, anything like that was ever mentioned to me. And I do remember my surgeon coming into the hospital to me into the room and said, "We got it all. Your lymph nodes were clear, there was clear margins, so you're literally cured." So I mean, to know that you're lying there even though you can't move because you've got chest tubes in, you're just absolutely delighted to think, this is brilliant, I'm cured, I'm after beating this monster. But you're completely naive to reality because this is your first time being in this rodeo. You haven't a clue what's the next go around.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, it is beautiful to hear those words, but like I say, the lack of understanding about what comes next is a big piece of that. So I think we're going to leave our first conversation here. We're going to come back shortly for episode 2 and talk a little bit more about what the next stage has meant for you. So thank you so
Perfect.
much for joining us,
Thank you.
Gillian.